by my laws you walk and my commandments you guard and do them, I will give your rain in due season. And you shall eat your bread to the full, and you will dwell in your land safely, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am God, your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt, that you shall not be slaves to them. And I have broken the bonds of your yoke, that you may go upright.
Back in Bukhara, it seems that the Naphtalites, a once mighty tribe of rulers, have been reduced to a tiny community of a few thousand who did not flee after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Once, you could find these people in dozens of towns dotting the area. Now, there are only a few isolated Bukharan Jewish enclaves, including this one, in the jewel of Central Asia, Samarkand, a city with a history dating back more than 2,500 years. City. Samarkand translates as the city of the Sumerians. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. We continued along the Silk Route towards China. The city of Kaifeng was the capital city of the Han Dynasty. Following the Naphthalite Trail, we learned that the Chinese records say that the Naphtalites were here. They were labeled Jews or Yuda by the Chinese. It is virtually impossible to identify a Jew in Kaifeng today. But there was one government official who was willing to talk.
There was a Jewish community, but now there is no more Jewish community. There is no Jewish community anymore. Only a few families. This is the synagogue, former site of the synagogue.
Okay. Can you write also here the two family names?
Only for your reference.
I understand.
And most likely, and you will be refused.
这个没有。
No， 不在这儿，我帮你问一下。
We did not find lost tribes in China waiting in their millions. But could the last Jews of Kaifeng help us in our quest?
About 300 years ago, our synagogue ceased to exist. Without the synagogue, there was no place for the Jews to congregate. Without a congregation, there were no more rabbis. Without the congregation, without the rabbis, without the religious rituals or readings of the scriptures, there was no more worship. Nothing was left.
Nonetheless, to this day, there are Chinese people in Kaifeng whose identity papers still describe them as Jews, Yuda.
Yudai, this is his name, right?
Yes.
Does he think he is a Jew?
他问你现在你自不自己也感觉你是否是犹太人？
当然是这样，是这样。
Yes, sure.
我民族意识还是有的，民族意识。
Amidst the mementos of the last Jews of Kaifeng, we thought, Is it possible that the Manasseh of India and Burma are the remnants of an unknown exodus across Central Asia and China? Perhaps it was time to further investigate the Manasseh claim.
Since time memorial, we long for this Israel, and we have sympathy for Israelis. Nobody told us to feel like that. I don't know how it comes. You know, whenever there is earthquake, then the eldest man of the house, he will run out of the house and shout, "Oh, we children of Manmasi are alive. We children of Manmasi are alive." He will shout at least 3-4 times at the top of his voice. Then he will come back. Then he says, "Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry." Then he will tell us, our ancestor has shaken the earth to find out whether his descendants are still alive or not.
There's something very poetic about the possibility that the Manasseh of Northeast India are the descendants of an unknown, long-forgotten Israelite trek across China into Burma, finally ending up in India. And when we were with the elders of the Manasseh, they pulled out a map that illustrated exactly the journey we had suspected, showing them starting in Israel, going across Central Asia to China, down into Burma and into India. And in fact, they went further and started singing a song in an archaic form of their language. A song not of the unknown Exodus, but this time a song of the known Exodus. The Exodus with which we're all familiar. The Exodus of the Red Sea parting. The Exodus of eating quail that falls from heaven, water coming from the rock, and the enemies of the Israelites drowning in the Red Sea.
Surazula galeidoe suna sumangzana me lo min vake avarualo.
The first verse is telling that the big Red Sea is parted. Then the second verse goes, we are going on foot across that parted sea. Then the water came up together again, and the enemies were being swallowed by the sea. They were being guided by a flame at night and a cloud during the day. And then this one pointed that you please pick up those birds being scattered there, and then draw the water which is flowing out of the rock.
Though their history demonstrates that their ancestors passed through China, the Manasseh insists that they are not Chinese and that they have preserved customs which are distinctly biblical.
If we were born China, then how come we are not following the religion of the Chinese people? The Chinese people religion is broadly two. One is Confucian and another one is Buddhist. In the two religions, there is no animal sacrifice. But when I was a small boy, we killed some animal. Then we put big plate. The blood of the animal was set there. Then the priest took some bushes, branches, and dip it, and thus painted the doorpost.
In 1894, Protestant missionaries came to these hills. Although they thought they were converting pagans, it seems that the people here were easily persuaded to embrace Christianity because they saw elements of their own history and mythology in the biblical stories told to them. The Manasseh always believed that they were from a far-off land, kept many biblical practices, and worshipped a single God. When we learned that Manasseh Manasseh eat pork, we thought these could not be Israelites. But interestingly, they mixed the pork with the ashes and regard it as a meal of shame to be eaten outside the home.
These are the ashes. We'll put ashes, and then they'll put water in here. But this is what we call it soam. Inside this, they used to put pork meat inside it, and then they ferment it, and then it becomes smelly. When it becomes smelly, they take out this portion, and then we take it, and then we put it, and then we boil it.
And is that meal a sign of mourning?
It's not a meal of mourning, but I think it shows us that we have been cursed. The reason why we have been thrown out from the land of our ancestors. But according to our forefathers, once you make this meat and the pork in here, that means you have made this thing unclean. If people ask us how long you have been eating this thing, this has been a curse from generation to generation, so we are still using this. So we're waiting for Shiloh to come and deliver us from all these things.
Shiloh will redeem us. Now that's a very strange construction, because Jehovah is the God of Israel, and Shiloh, or Shiloh in Hebrew, was the holy place for the northern tribes, for the lost tribes. And Shiloh seems to be a fusion of those two terms. Shiloh will redeem. And the same person who said that appeared to us in a talit, in a prayer shawl, which looked identical to the prayer shawls that the Jews wear all over the world.
This shawl is known as Tolopuan. So this Tolopuan is a long traditional clothes worn by our forefather when they make a vow. Suppose if they make a vow of killing one mithun or a tiger, without killing a tiger they will not come home once they make the vow with wearing this shawl. In Mizo, Tolo means never return back, no turning back. These are made with fringes.
The Bible commanded the Israelites to tie a blue thread to the corners of their garments. So there's always a blue thread at the corner?
Yes, there's always a blue thread.
These people have had a problem in that the Jewish world couldn't relate to them. No one answered their appeals. No one answered their cry. About 50 years ago, a man named Chala, who was one of their leaders, they regard him as a prophet, told them that the time had come for them to return to the land of their forefathers. Many got up and were willing to follow him. Nobody said, "What land of our forefathers are you talking about?" They all knew that the Holy Land was their ancestral home. People called my father a prophet, and in a sense he was. It was revealed to him that we were Israelites. But he wasn't a prophet in the sense that Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Hosea were prophets. No, he wasn't a prophet in that way. But in order for us to realize who we are, he did have a revelation. God did not want us to be lost forever.
Daniel Benjamin's father was a follower of Chala. Like Chala, he sought to emigrate to Israel. Though in his lifetime the Israeli authorities ignored Daniel's father, he was buried facing Jerusalem.
My father wanted very much to immigrate to Israel. He was, in fact, one of the first to return to Judaism, to start practicing Judaism in this part of India. He was a leader of our community. He also taught me a lot about Israel, about Zionism, and about Judaism.
After Chala's death, some of his followers concluded that maybe they should return to Judaism before returning to Zion. Since they were reluctant to completely abandon Christianity, they opted for a homegrown version of Messianic Judaism, a Jews for Jesus type of worship.
Jawaka
But for some of the Manasseh, the call of their ancestors eventually proved too strong to ignore.
Look at this picture. A picture which shows how the Torah is being brought from Ethiopia to Israel. See how great it is? The Ethiopian Jews were like us. They had great reverence for the covenant and studied the Torah with great dedication. They loved Torah. Here they enter Jerusalem, bringing their Torah with them. With great joy, we too will soon enter Jerusalem.
Thousands of Manasseh have now forsaken Christianity and adopted Orthodox Judaism.
Could these people really be Menashe? Because if they are, we may have identified as many as 4 of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Menashe, Dan being the Ethiopians, and Issachar and Naphtali among the Bukharan Jews of Central Asia. And if we were right to think of the Bukharans as the descendants of Naphtali, then maybe we should be looking for Zebulon, because Zebulon was the brother tribe of Naphtali in ancient Israel. And history records that at the same time as the Naphtalites were ruling Central Asia in the 5th and 6th centuries, another tribe was ruling parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. This tribe was called Zavula. So maybe we could find in the Indian subcontinent, not on the border of Burma, descendants of the Zavula, just as we had found descendants of the Naphtalites in Central Asia.
Of our research, we repeatedly came across a little-known group in India that could not be easily related to other Jews. So we made our way to Bombay in search of Zebulon. Bombay is home to 8 million Hindus and 1 million Muslims. Here we found a community numbering about 5,000. That by all accounts should have assimilated into the dominant culture long ago. And though they do not call themselves by any particular tribal name, significantly, like the lost tribes, and unlike other Jews, they call themselves the children of Israel, not Judah.
I am not Yehudi, I am Bnei Israel. Yehudis, those Jews who migrated to India from Baghdad. My family is Bnei Israel.
300 years ago, a Jewish merchant traveling through the coastal region was stunned to see Indian peasants chanting Jewish prayers. Fascinated, he stopped to inquire as to how they knew these prayers, and was shocked when they replied that they were Israelites who had lived in India from ancient times. Skeptical of these claims, the merchant visited a village and presented the Bnei Israel with an assortment of fish to be made into a meal, some kosher, some not. When he saw that the villagers knew which fish were kosher, he was convinced that they were an Israelite community, and he helped them return to Judaism. Unique to the Bnei Israel community is the Melida ceremony, which is a kind of offering of rice, scented flowers, and fruit. Though they had forgotten the reasons behind some of their practices, the Bnei Israel had clung to them as something precious to be passed through the generations.
They were observing certain rules and regulations of Judaism. when they got an opportunity of being told as to what the meaning was of that particular thing, they were only too happy. Why should they lose? And nobody forced us. If they had said, no, you must become Hindus or you must become Mohammedans, but nobody ever forced us because we were such a minority in the whole population of India. Nobody worried about us.
But what if they were not always a tiny minority? What if the mysterious rulers of northern India in the 5th and 6th centuries were indeed the lost tribe of Zebulon?
The Bnei Israel community's own historian, his name was Chaim Kar, wrote a book about the Bnei Israel at the turn of the 20th century. He believed that they are descendants of the lost tribes. He thought the tribes were scattered to the ends of the earth, and some made their way to India. He talks about various practices they have and compares them to the rituals of the Jerusalem temple. For example, the Melida ceremony. He argues that in an earlier period, they even had sacrifices like those in the temple. But these are all speculations. There is no documentation or proof.
After nearly 3 millennia, there may not be proof, but there is a tantalizing hint. The holiest site for the Bnei Israel of India is a rock outcrop 100 kilometers south of Bombay. Here we learned that the most revered figure for the Bnei Israel is not King David, or Abraham, or even Moses. It is the prophet Elijah.
The Jews in India believe that the prophet Elijah went to heavens from this place. The mark of his chariot can be seen on the stone rock that we are standing on. The hooves can be seen laid down there, and they said that his chariot slipped here, and on the top of the mountains over there you can see another sign of the hooves of his horses.
Using the rock as a kind of altar, the Bnei Israel make an offering of coconut on the mark of Elijah's chariot. This veneration of Elijah is suggestive, since Elijah was the prophet of the Israelite tribes that came to be lost. But how would they have gotten here? The community has its own myth of origin.
2,000 years ago, a ship of Israelis got caught in a storm, and the ship was wrecked on the coast of Bombay. And only 7 couples survived that particular shipwreck. And the 7 couples landed at a place known as Naugaon. And we are supposed to be the offshoot of those 7 couples.
It
makes more sense that those Israelites came not directly from Israel, but from the north. That is, the area of the Silk Route. Israelites of the tribes exiled by the Assyrians became involved in the silk trade, trading along one of the branches of the ancient route that became known as the Silk Route. I believe that these Israelites got as far as Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Kashmir. From there, they got to where the Persian Gulf meets the Indian Ocean, and then, in the course of their trade, they may have sailed along the Indian coast.
Whichever way they got here, the Bnei Israel can still point to the graves where the survivors of the shipwreck are said to be buried. It now seems that we can draw a plausible link between the Bnei Israel and seafarers coming from the north. But does this prove that the ancient rulers of northern India had any connection whatsoever to the lost tribe of Zebulon?
We have coins that say Javul on them. We have recorded history of their capital city called Baruch, which in Hebrew means blessed. We know that the title of their king was Mir HaGola, which in Hebrew means light of the exile. And we know the name of the king. Their most famous king was Torah Mana, which in Hebrew or Hindi means, or seems to mean, belief in the Torah, faith in the books of Moses. So unless these were all coincidental, we could speculate that the Zavula of India and Pakistan were really the lost tribe of Zevulun.
As if responding to an ancient call, many of the Bnei Israel of Bombay have returned to their ancestral home in Israel. They gravitate towards Elijah's cave and continue to demonstrate their reverence for the biblical prophet. Elijah's cave is in the old territory of Zebulun. Standing in this cave, I must confess that I felt that I was in the Twilight Zone, because I was among people who were acting out a script that was written almost 3,000 years ago. And they seemed to be fixated on the prophet that warned the tribes of their exiles and promised them redemption and the end of days. But there was a problem here. The prophecy speaks of millions, and this was a small group. The biggest tribe we had found was Menashe, 1.5 million. Perhaps the clue was there, because the brother tribe of Menashe was Ephraim. So perhaps we had to look for Ephraim. For that, we had to go back to our treasure map. We had to go back to the Bible.
In the 8th century BC, the biblical account of the facts is fully reliable about the reasoning, about the whys and hows. That is something else. But about what happened, we can fully trust the biblical account. It is fully parallel to what we found in archaeological excavations.
I look at things as a believer. For me, the scriptures are paramount. In the Book of Kings, we find in several places references to where the tribes were exiled to. Also in the Book of Chronicles. It says in these texts that they were exiled to 5 places. First, the mountains of the Medes. This is in the direction of Kurdistan and the Caucasus. Second, the river Gozan. Third, Hala. Fourth, Hara. And last, Havor. Where are these places?
In modern Syria, there are places that roughly correspond to the biblical locations. There is a river called Havor, and nearby there is a city called Gozan.
It's very interesting. A few documents were found recently in a city on the river Habur called Durkatlimu, a German excavation, and in 1993 they were published. Only 4 documents, I think, and in 1 or 2 of them there are Israelite names. One of them is Hezekiah. Now the date is the first year 2 or what of Nebuchadnezzar. So that means they are not Judeans. They definitely are Israelites. Israelites in the area of Habur, where they should be.
Today there are no Israelites waiting by the river Havor. But what if they moved east, taking their place names with them? One of the passes between Afghanistan and Pakistan is known to the world as the Khyber Pass. Places on earth. It is is the heart of Pakistan's northwest frontier, the Wild West of the East. The first thing one notices is that the Pakistani government has no real authority here. The only way to obtain safe passage is to travel with an armed escort from the ruling people in the area, the Pathans. They have guarded the Khyber Pass for more than 2,000 years, driving away Genghis Khan, the British Army, and most recently, the Soviets.
In Hebrew, it's known as Havor Pass, the same name as in the Bible. And next to the Khyber Pass, there's a city called Peshawar in Pakistan. Peshawar means the same thing, the Havor Pass. So we thought, could the Khyber be Havor in the Bible? If it is, there should be here a river called Gozan. And right there, flowing into the Kabul River, is the river Ghazni. If this is Havor, we thought, there should be somewhere around here the city Hara. And 300 kilometers away, in Afghanistan, there's a city, Herat.
The whole world knows this area as a hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism. There are 15 million Pathans and not a single Jew among them. But we set out to investigate whether under the Islamic surface